We hear the word bombshell, and I think certainly it's true in this case.
Setting up in California to spread wellness and love and sincerity have done the exact opposite. They have dumped on their family,
Listen, this isn't your typical royal whisper. This is the kind of allegation that doesn't just bruise reputations, it threatens to collapse an entire identity. Because the moment the word paternity gets breathed into a story like this, everything stops being gossip and starts feeling like a countdown. The kind where people don't react with calm truth, they react with panic. And according to what's being said behind the scenes, the reason this story is detonating so hard is simple. Tom Bower didn't allegedly come with vibes. He came with something far more dangerous. The suggestion of proof. Not a messy rumor, not a tabloid wink, not a source says. The claim is that he's sitting on the kind of material that can be checked, verified, cross-referenced. The kind of thing that doesn't need shouting because the paper trail does the screaming for him. And the timing, that's what makes it feel like an ambush, because the narrative being pushed is that Bower doesn't throw bombs randomly. He waits until the target is already wobbling, until the public is already suspicious, until the silence is already loud, and then he leans in and lets one word do the damage: paternity. And the moment that word allegedly entered the air, everything reportedly changed. Fast. If there is one thing Tom Bower understands better than scandal, it is timing. He does not shout accusations into the open and hope they survive the noise. He waits, he watches, and then he speaks only when silence will do the most damage. Harry in shock as Tom Bower XP. Now, let's talk about why this clip hits like a slap. Because it sets the tone of the entire storm, this isn't presented as a reckless accusation. It's presented as a calculated move, like someone holding a match, not lighting it until the room is already soaked in gasoline. And the way this story is framed, the real horror isn't even the claim itself, it's the reaction. Because when someone is falsely accused, they usually respond like this: clear denial, solid facts, calm confidence, and most importantly, verification. But what's described here is the opposite: a scramble, a rush, a shut-it-down energy. The narrative says that Prince Harry allegedly didn't react like a man insulted. He reacted like a man cornered, like a man who wasn't just angry but terrified of something opening. The story paints a picture of sudden legal threats, warnings sent through intermediaries, and a demand for silence that felt less like protecting the truth and more like trying to stop the question from spreading. And that's where the gossip becomes poisonous, because people don't judge only the allegation, they judge the behavior around it. And the question everyone starts asking is brutal: if the story is nonsense, why move like time is your enemy? Because time only becomes an enemy when you're afraid of what it might uncover. Here's the part that makes this whole thing feel like a thriller instead of a rumor. The script claims there was one clean, simple move that could have ended this instantly. Not a press release, not a documentary, not a lawsuit. One step: verification. And yet, in the way this story is narrated, that step never appears. No public end of story, no definitive closure, no moment where the door slams shut on doubt. And when that doesn't happen, people don't stay neutral. They don't wait politely. They fill the silence with suspicion. Because silence doesn't calm gossip, it feeds it. Silence is a greenhouse. Doubt grows fast in it. And the narrative shifts from, is this true, to the more dangerous question, why won't they prove it isn't? That's the moment a rumor stops being a rumor and becomes a shadow, following everything, changing how people interpret every statement, every appearance, every move. Then the story drags us to the next pressure point: the birth narrative. It claims that royal births usually follow a rigid pattern: medical confirmations, clear announcements, formalities that exist for one purpose: certainty. But according to the script, Archie's birth didn't follow what the public expected from long-standing precedent. Instead, it describes vagueness, carefully controlled messaging, and sealed details that created a feeling of information being managed instead of shared. Now listen carefully. On their own, each missing detail could have an innocent explanation: privacy, security concerns, modern choices. But gossip never looks at pieces separately. Gossip stacks them. And when you stack enough, why is that unclear? Moments. People stop thinking privacy and start thinking control. Control over timing, control over visibility, control over who is allowed to confirm what. And in the world of monarchy, where symbolism is oxygen, hand, that kind of control doesn't look normal. It looks deliberate. And then the story does what gossip always does when it wants to turn suspicion into obsession. It introduces a third figure, not named as a confirmed fact, presented as a shadow in the background. A man described as powerful, financially independent, operating outside protocol. The kind of person who doesn't need royal permission to exist near the story. And this is where the script goes from palace whispers to dangerous insinuation, because it doesn't claim a public relationship, it claims proximity, travel overlaps, charity circles, private moments that allegedly don't appear in mainstream coverage but live inside private timelines, and gossip is ruthless. Proximity without explanation becomes a question mark, and question marks become conspiracy. Then comes the image, a hotel hallway, warm lighting, a too private moment, Meghan positioned with a man who was claimed to be clearly not Prince Harry, arm around the waist, familiar, unguarded. And the story says the photograph didn't just circulate, it vanished, scrubbed, deleted, disappeared with speed that looked professional. And here's the sick irony, suppression doesn't erase gossip, it sharpens it. Because people assume only one reason something gets erased that aggressively, it's inconvenient. So the photo becomes a symbol, not because it's proven, but because it's treated like something that must not be seen. And when the script claims it resurfaced later in clearer form, higher resolution, more undeniable, the story crosses another line. Now, it's not a rumor spreading, it's a rumor being fought. And anything that's fought that hard starts looking important. And then, just when you think the story can't get more cinematic, it introduces a secret gathering in California. A villa, elite guests, no phones, power players, billionaire circles. The kind of place where whispers aren't just gossip, whispers are currency. Well, and the script claims that after a charity flight connected to Colombia, something was left behind. A leather briefcase. Inside, not money, not contracts, but a high-resolution print of that same hallway image. And that detail changes everything because it suggests something chilling. The image wasn't a random leak, it was a possession. Something kept, something carried, something guarded. And when an image is treated like an object someone owns, gossip doesn't interpret it as oops. Gossip interprets it as evidence. By this point, the narrative is doing what it was designed to do. It's not trying to prove a fact in court. It's trying to create a feeling of pressure building, of doors closing, of people moving fast behind the scenes. And then the script brings in the voice that, in its telling, changes the temperature completely, Trevor Engelson. Meghan Markle's first husband, described here as someone who stayed quiet for years, no drama, no public war, until allegedly now, when he speaks in a way the script frames as tired, controlled, almost resigned. Not a man trying to win a headline, a man who sounds like he's finally stopped protecting the past. And that's where part one ends, with the tension tightening like a wire. Because if the story is suggesting that a former husband saw something years ago, something that wasn't romance but strategy, then the rumor stops being random internet talk. It becomes a narrative of a pattern. And when gossip finds a pattern, it doesn't let go. It grips and it squeezes, because if there's a pattern, then the next question becomes terrifying. Was the fairy tale ever real, or was it always a performance? And this is where the story claims the air inside the room finally changed, because up until this point, everything had been whispers, intermediaries, lawyers speaking in careful language, and friends being told to stay out of it. But the narrative says there comes a moment when gossip stops being external noise and crawls inside the marriage. According to the script, this was the moment Prince Harry allegedly stopped reacting like a shield and started reacting like a man with a question he could no longer outrun. Not a question shouted, not a public accusation, a quiet, poisonous thought that arrives late at night and doesn't leave. What if? The story claims this doubt didn't explode, it settled. And once doubt settles, everything starts to look different. Memories rearrange themselves. Old conversations replay with new emphasis. Small inconsistencies stop feeling small. And the script alleges that Harry began privately revisiting moments he had once dismissed. Sudden changes in plans, guarded phone calls, and insistence on controlling narratives. The absolute resistance to outside verification. Not proof, but enough smoke to make the fire feel imaginable. And that's when the story says the confrontation happened. Not dramatic, not loud. No shouting, no thrown objects, no Hollywood meltdown, just a question. A single, devastating question asked behind closed doors, in a tone that wasn't angry but careful. A question that once spoken cannot be unspoken. And here's the detail the script leans on hardest. It claims Meghan didn't explode either. She didn't scream. She didn't storm out. She didn't laugh it off. She allegedly went still. Because stillness in gossip language is not not calm. Stillness is calculation. The narrative describes a pause, too long, a silence that wasn't disbelief but assessment. And in that silence, Harry allegedly realized something that chilled him far more than any rumor. This wasn't a conversation she hadn't anticipated. And that realization, true or not, is what the script frames as the real fracture point. Because when someone seems prepared for an accusation you barely understood yourself, it plants a deeper fear than denial ever could. The story claims that after that night, nothing was said publicly, but everything shifted privately. Schedules separated, conversations shortened, eye contact changed, and the most damning detail in the script isn't an argument, it's distance. Because distance suggests avoidance, and avoidance suggests something neither side wants examined too closely. Then comes the final pressure point. The one thing that could silence everything. Nah. The script makes it clear, no court ordered it, no public demand, no official announcement, just the quiet, obvious solution sitting untouched in the middle of the chaos. And here's where the gossip becomes brutal. Because according to the narrative, that test never happens. At least not publicly, not definitively, not in a way that ends speculation. And gossip doesn't ask why once. It asks why forever. Why not end it? Why not shut it down? Why let the shadow linger? The script suggests that every reason offered, privacy, protection, dignity, sounds noble until people notice those values weren't always treated as sacred before. Privacy is only convincing when it's consistent, and inconsistency is the oxygen conspiracy breeds. Now, the story pulls back for its final sting. It says that Harry, trapped between loyalty and doubt, did what he has always done when overwhelmed. He retreated, not physically, but emotionally, into isolation, into internal war. And the tragedy, as framed here, isn't that he believes the rumor, it's that he can't disprove it to himself. Because belief isn't binary, it's a spectrum, and living on that spectrum is torture. The script paints him as a man stuck between identities, the prince raised on duty and lineage, and the husband who burned bridges to protect his family. And now, the story claims both identities are at risk, because if the rumor is false and left unchallenged, it corrodes trust anyway. And if the rumor is true, then everything he sacrificed, his name, his home, his bloodline, was traded for a lie so big it couldn't survive daylight. That's why, according to the script, this story won't die. Not because it's proven, not because it's factual, but because the one thing that would end it, absolute clarity, never arrives. And gossip has a rule it never breaks. Where certainty is denied, suspicion moves in permanently. So the question hanging over this narrative isn't, is it true? The question is far more devastating, why won't anyone end it? And until that question has an answer, the script suggests this story isn't going anywhere. Because silence doesn't bury doubt, it protects it. And once doubt is protected long enough, it starts to feel like truth. It starts to feel like truth. It starts to feel like truth. It starts...